I'm going to have to disagree with this one. Let's just turn off the pause menu hints. It's not as if we need them anymore. For God's sake. Let's talk about why Ronin is a stealth game and how the player is encouraged to use the stealthiest skills at their disposal and avoid triggering the game system into an active state, where possible. Or, to put it another way, this video will look at how Ronin turns a player from a careful, turn-based warrior into a brazen, lethal ninja. We should remind ourselves of how we define stealth games here at Stealth Docs, which, as you should all know by now, is the channel with the last word on everything to do with stealth games. Yes. Yep, okay. I've argued in the past that a video game needs just two things to be a stealth game. 1. A sneaky bastard as the player-controlled protagonist, assassin, thief, spy, escaped prisoner, someone whose interests are in staying undetected as much as possible. 2. Obstacles capable of switching from a passive state of awareness to an active state of awareness. So that would be guards of some kind or another, who begin by monitoring the game space, then leap into action only if the player is detected. Whether it's 2D, 3D, first person, third person, isometric, real-time or turn-based, with a combat system or without a combat system, all of that, and much more besides, doesn't really matter. If your game has fundamental components 1 and 2, my argument is that it can be described as a stealth game. Take note that this doesn't mean that it's a good stealth game, or that it can't objectively be described as belonging to another genre as well. Those things very much depend on what's going on under the hood, so to speak. For our purposes, against criteria 1 and 2, Ronin passes the stealth game test. Obstacles are capable of passive and active behaviour. Players take on the role of a motorcycle-riding assassin who has to infiltrate various locations and kill their targets. In terms of concept, it's about as stealthy as stealth gets. So, how does Ronin execute this concept? Anyone who's familiar with Gunpoint may spot some visual similarities, but the gameplay mechanisms in Ronin are fundamentally different. Ronin is all about the combat. Turn-based, strategic, moment-to-moment slaughter of any armed NPCs stood between the player and their objectives. I know it sounds ridiculous to describe Ronin as a stealth game when its core mechanisms clearly revolve around combat, but do they? Like all stealth games, Ronin's systems begin in a passive state, only becoming active once the player is detected. During passive phases, the player is free to move around the game space and can avoid engaging enemies if they choose to, but there's a catch. Although your main objective is either to hack a few computers or kill a single target, Ronin will always direct players into scenarios where bloodshed and detection are unavoidable. Stairwells leading to brightly lit corridors, lifts opening out into lobbies where guards are perfectly positioned to spot the player, windows that have to be broken through alerting anyone nearby. This means that learning how to deal with an active system is key to the experience Ronin offers players. There is literally no way to ghost through this game. It forces players into confrontations with the AI. Once the player's detected, the gameplay shifts from real-time movement to turn-based strategic combat. Enemy sightlines pop up to show players where gunfire or other attacks will be coming from, and players have to avoid these while positioning themselves to take down the guards. Fully automatic weapons and armoured swordsmen keep things interesting as the difficulty ramps up. The player's skill set ramps up too, with new moves that can stun, distract, and kill enemies in a variety of ways. By landing multiple hits in combat that stun or kill enemies, players gain energy that can be used to perform special moves. Gain enough, and they'll get a limit break, which is another way of saying an extra turn in Ronin's case. So, how? How is this a well-executed stealth game when it's all about the bloody combat? Okay, here's the thing. Yes, there are sections within almost every mission in Ronin that will force players into being detected and subsequently a combat phase. However, if we take a look at the skill tree, we start to find things that change how players can engage with enemies. Ronin's turn-based combat mechanisms kick in only after the player is detected. A classic exclamation point indicator pops up, and the game snaps into its turn-based combat mode. Making noise will get some attention, but to be officially detected, a guard has to spot the player's character. This means that players can perform sneak attacks on unsuspecting guards, stunning and killing them before the guards can react and spot the player's character. But it gets better. So much better. Remember that energy meter? It's used both inside and outside of combat. Meaning if players fill it just a little bit by stunning and killing an unsuspecting guard, they can access their special combat skills outside of the turn-based combat mode. Here's the best part. During combat phases, Ronin pauses the action before each turn, allowing players to take their time and plan their next move. However, players can also use this pause function outside of combat, entirely at their discretion. So, to summarise, this is what players can do instead of charging headfirst into an active combat scenario, at least when that choice is presented to them. Players can stun and kill passive enemies, build up their energy meter, use their special skills, and pause the action at any point, all without triggering the system into an active state of awareness. This drastically shifts Ronin's power dynamic towards favouring the player for as long as the player remains undetected. Here's a sequence from the second assassination mission in the game. I approach my target using an obvious route, then trigger the system into an active state, initiating the combat phase. This footage is sped up a little, but you can hopefully see I have to choose my actions with care to avoid getting shot. Now, here's the same sequence from the same mission, only this time I approach using a stealthier route and I avoid triggering the system into an active state. Because I'm the one who chooses when to pause the action, it gets a little choppy, but you can see the difference in the gameplay. This time I'm being careful not to avoid getting shot, but to avoid getting detected in the first place. While in stealth mode, the player has total control of the situation. If they get spotted, which, by the way, is very easy to do in a room full of obstacles, things get a lot tougher as the system pushes back. You have to dodge, plan your approach, figure out a way around the gunfire and the enemies, and this may be more difficult to do depending on who's around and who knows you're there. I have to think that this design, this power dynamic, was intentional, not least because all missions, barring the last one, have these bonus objectives. Kill all enemies, avoid a lockdown, which can be triggered by NPCs calling for reinforcements, and no civilian casualties. Completing all three of these bonus objectives in a mission gains the player one skill point to spend on their skill tree. While there are parts of the game where detection and combat are inevitable, there are also plenty of sections where using Ronin's pause functionality against the passive system achieves the best possible results. The bonus objectives are achievable either way, but the amount of control offered to players who use sneakier, precision tactics is where Ronin is at its best. Ronin's developer doesn't think it's a stealth game at all, but I hope this video has offered a robust argument against that idea. It's a stealth game that encourages warriors to turn into ninjas. But is it a good stealth game? I guess that's up to you. On the whole, I think it is. Stealth remains the player's most powerful tool, and that's as much as I can ask for in a stealth game, even if it does force players into combat scenarios, and tell us lies in the pause menu hints.